The burgundy Buick smelled like Harold's aftershave and old coffee. I pressed my face against the leather headrest where his gray head had rested for 15 years. 3 days since we buried him. 3 days, and Michael had already sold Harold's car to some dealer downtown. My fingers shook as I reached for the glove box, just checking for forgotten things, his reading glasses maybe, or those peppermints he always kept for church. The metal latch felt cold under my thumb. Click. A manila envelope sat where the registration should be. My name, written in Harold's careful script across the front. Eleanor, not Ellie like he'd called me for 43 years. Eleanor, formal, urgent. Inside, a small silver key caught the morning light. Beneath it, a note in Harold's handwriting. Ellie, if you're reading this, they've already started. The key is to Box 247 at First National. Trust no one in the family. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. -H. My breath stopped. They've already started. Started what? Michael and Jennifer had been nothing but helpful since Harold's stroke 2 years ago, taking care of bills, managing accounts, driving me to appointments when I was too tired to think straight. A sharp rap on the car window made me jump. Michael's face peered through the glass, his expression shifting from concern to something else when he saw my hands clutching the envelope. "Mom, what are you doing out here? The dealer's coming in 20 minutes. I shoved the envelope into my coat pocket, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Just saying goodbye." His face softened, but his eyes stayed sharp, alert. "I know it's hard, but we need to let go of Dad's things." Let go. As if Harold was just things to be discarded. I climbed out of the car, my legs unsteady. Michael's hand touched my elbow, guiding me toward the house like I was fragile. Breakable. Through the kitchen window, Jennifer's silhouette watched us approach. She raised her hand in a wave, but something in her posture made my skin prickle. Harold never kept secrets from me. Never. In 43 years of marriage, he'd shared everything, his fears about the business, his pride in our children, even his embarrassing snoring problem. Why would he hide something now? Why would he warn me about family? I touched the envelope in my pocket as we reached the front door. The key felt warm now, almost burning through the paper. The kitchen clock ticked past 3 in the morning. Harold's note lay flat on the table under the yellow light, the words swimming before my tired eyes. Trust no one in the family. I traced each letter with my finger, trying to understand what Harold had seen that I'd missed. Michael and Jennifer had been perfect since Harold's diagnosis 2 years ago. Perfect. They'd swooped in when Harold had his stroke, taking over the bills I'd struggled to understand, managing investments that made my head spin. Jennifer had even suggested adding her name to our accounts. "For convenience, Mom," she'd said, her manicured hand covering mine as I held the pen. "This way, if something happens to you, we can handle everything without legal complications." I'd signed those papers in the hospital waiting room while Harold fought for his life in the ICU. My hand had shaken so badly, Jennifer had to steady my wrist. Wednesday morning arrived with Michael's familiar knock. He pushed through the front door carrying coffee in a white bakery bag, his smile bright as always, every Wednesday for the past year like clockwork. "Morning, Mom." "Got your favorite blueberry scones." I watched him set the bag on the counter and noticed how his eyes swept across Harold's mail stacked by the phone. His fingers moved through the envelopes quickly, separating them into neat piles. Bills here, investment statements there. Anything with Harold's name went into a third pile that Michael slipped into his jacket pocket. "Michael, honey, you don't need to take Dad's mail." His hand paused over a thick envelope from our investment firm. "Just trying to help you stay organized, Mom. No point in you worrying about accounts that are already closed." Closed. When had we closed investment accounts? Jennifer emerged from the bathroom, her lipstick fresh and her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. She kissed my cheek, leaving a faint trace of vanilla perfume. "How are we feeling today, Eleanor?" We, as if my grief belonged to her, too. "I've been thinking about our old savings account at Commerce Bank," I said, watching their faces. The one Harold opened when we first got married. I'd like to check on it. Michael's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. Jennifer's smile tightened at the corners, just for a second. "Mom, you don't need to worry about those old accounts," Jennifer said, her voice smooth as honey. "We've consolidated everything into the main checking account for simplicity. Remember? You signed the papers last month." The papers last month. I stared at her perfect face, searching my memory. Harold had been in the hospital for pneumonia. I'd been running on 3 hours of sleep and endless cups of vending machine coffee. Jennifer had spread documents across the visitor chair explaining how consolidation would streamline everything. I remembered signing, multiple pages. Jennifer's pen clicking as she flipped from signature line to signature line. "I signed a lot of things last month," I said slowly. "Of course you did." Michael reached over and patted my shoulder. "You were handling Dad's crisis like a champion. We just wanted to make sure you had one less thing to worry about." The pat felt dismissive, like I was a child who'd done well on a spelling test. After they left, I sat in Harold's old chair and thought about convenience. How convenient it had been for Jennifer to take over our bill paying. How convenient that she'd insisted on having access to our accounts. How convenient that Michael had power of attorney papers ready the day after Harold's stroke. At 2 o'clock, I drove to First National Bank. My hands trembled as I pulled Harold's key from my purse and set it on the counter. The metal felt cold against my palm. Mrs. Patricia Coleman, the bank manager, recognized me immediately. Her face softened with sympathy. "Mrs. Whitman, I'm so sorry for your loss. Harold was such a gentleman. Always asked about my grandchildren." She led me to the safety deposit box vault, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Box 247 sat in the middle row waiting. The key turned easily, as if Harold had used it recently. Inside, manila folders held documents that made my knees buckle. Mrs. Coleman caught my elbow as I swayed. "Are you all right, dear?" I wasn't all right. Nothing was all right. The first folder contained a copy of my will, the real one. The one I'd signed 3 years ago with our family lawyer, leaving everything equally between Michael and Rebecca, 50-50, just like Harold and I had always planned. Clipped to it was another will, one with my signature at the bottom, dated 6 weeks ago. This version left everything to Michael alone. Rebecca's name had been completely removed. I stared at my own signature. The handwriting looked right, but I had no memory of signing it. None. The second folder held bank statements from accounts I didn't recognize. Investment portfolios in my name showing massive withdrawals over the past 6 months. $200,000 transferred to an account I'd never seen before. An account with Jennifer's name on it. My chest felt tight. The vault's air seemed too thin. At the bottom of the box, a USB drive sat next to another note in Harold's careful script. Security camera footage from the kitchen. Jennifer doesn't know about the hidden camera behind the spice rack. Watch March 15th, 2:30 p.m. Harold had installed a hidden camera in our own kitchen. The man who'd trusted everyone, who'd never locked our front door until the neighborhood changed, had been watching our family in secret. Mrs. Coleman helped me back to her office chair. "Can I get you some water, Mrs. Whitman?" I nodded, clutching the USB drive. March 15th. That was the day Harold had been in the hospital for his pneumonia tests. The day I'd been home, alone, exhausted, and worried sick. The day Jennifer had brought those convenience papers for me to sign. I drove home with Harold's evidence burning a hole in my purse. The house felt different when I walked through the front door. Smaller, less safe. I looked toward the kitchen and noticed the spice rack for the first time in years. Just a wooden shelf holding oregano and paprika and Harold's beloved garlic powder. But now I knew Harold had been watching from behind those innocent spices, recording whatever had made him write that desperate warning. I waited until their car pulled out of the driveway. Wednesday night, date night for Michael and Jennifer. Their weekly ritual that had started right after Harold's stroke. How thoughtful of them to maintain their relationship during our family crisis. The USB drive felt warm in my palm as I slid it into my laptop. The screen flickered, then filled with grainy black and white footage of our kitchen. March 15th, 2:30 p.m. The timestamp glowed in the corner like a warning. Harold was at the hospital that day for cardiac testing. I'd been upstairs napping, exhausted from 3 days of sleeping in waiting room chairs. The kitchen looked empty and peaceful on the screen, sunlight streaming through the window above the sink. Then Michael and Jennifer walked into frame. The change was instant, complete. Their caring masks slipped away like shed skin. Jennifer's shoulders straightened, her gentle smile vanishing. Michael's concerned expression hardened into something cold and calculating. "The old man's getting suspicious," Jennifer hissed, her voice sharp as broken glass. She moved to Harold's small desk in the corner, yanking open drawers with quick, angry movements. Papers scattered across the counter as she rifled through our private documents. "He asked me about the Schwab account yesterday. We need to move faster. Schwab account. I'd never heard of any Schwab account. Harold had always been so careful to discuss our finances with me, explaining every investment, every decision. When had we opened an account I didn't know about?" Michael appeared beside Jennifer, his face grim. "Mom signed the new will, but she was barely conscious. If Harold recovers enough to talk to her properly, new will. The forged document from the safety deposit box. I watched my son discuss my own legal documents like I was already dead. He won't recover." Jennifer's voice cut through the kitchen like ice. "Dr. Morrison confirmed the heart damage is extensive, and I've been very careful with his medication timing." My hand flew to my mouth. The laptop screen blurred as tears filled my eyes. Jennifer had been managing Harold's medications for weeks, insisting she understood his complex schedule better than the hospital nurses. She'd arrive every morning with his pills organized in her little plastic containers, explaining which ones needed to be taken with food, which ones on an empty stomach. Careful with his medication timing. I grabbed the wastebasket and retched, my stomach emptying itself of coffee and grief. Harold's final weeks flashed through my memory. How he'd seemed confused some days, sleepy others. How Jennifer had always been there with his next dose, checking her watch, adjusting timing for optimal absorption. My hands shook as I wiped my mouth and forced myself to look back at the screen. Jennifer had found something in Harold's desk, my checkbook. The one I'd been searching for, the one I'd assumed I'd misplaced during the chaos of Harold's hospitalization. I've been practicing her signature for weeks. Look, Jennifer picked up Harold's pen and wrote my name across a deposit slip. The handwriting was perfect. Every loop and curve matched my own careful script that I'd learned in Catholic school 60 years ago. "We can clean out the remaining accounts while she's grieving," Jennifer continued, her pen dancing across the paper with my stolen signature. "Grief makes people sign anything." I stared at my own name written in her hand. How many checks had she already forged? How many documents had my signature authorized without my knowledge? Michael shifted uncomfortably, running his hand through his hair. "What about Rebecca?" "She'll ask questions when she finds out about the will change." Rebecca. My daughter in California, who called every Sunday, who sent birthday cards with long handwritten notes. Jennifer's laugh was sharp and cold. "Rebecca lives 3,000 miles away and calls twice a year. By the time she realizes anything, it'll be too late to contest." Twice a year. Rebecca called every single week. But Jennifer had been intercepting my calls, hadn't she? Taking messages, promising to have me call back when I was feeling better. "Besides," Jennifer continued, her voice turning silky, "your mother trusts us completely. We've been so helpful, so caring." Her smile made my skin crawl. The same smile she'd given me that morning when she'd brought coffee and asked about my sleep. The same smile she'd worn at Harold's funeral when she'd held my arm and whispered comforting words. All of it. All of it had been performance. The footage continued. Jennifer pulled a manila folder from her purse and spread documents across Harold's desk. Legal papers I'd never seen before. Power of attorney forms with my signature, trust modifications, even what looked like a preliminary deed transfer for our house. Once the old lady's signature is perfected, we can have everything transferred within a month of Harold's death. Old lady. That's what I was to them. Not Mom, not Eleanor. Just an obstacle to be managed and removed. And if she gets suspicious? Michael asked. Jennifer shrugged, the gesture casual as discussing the weather. She's 68, just lost her husband, clearly developing some memory issues. Who would believe her over us? We're the devoted children taking care of poor, confused Eleanor. Poor, confused Eleanor. I watched Jennifer practice expressions in Harold's desk mirror concern, patience, loving worry. She tilted her head just so, softened her eyes, curved her lips into that gentle smile I'd trusted for 2 years. We should probably head upstairs before she wakes up, Michael said, glancing toward the ceiling. They gathered the documents quickly, Jennifer slipping them back into her purse with practiced efficiency. Before leaving the kitchen, she straightened the desk chair and smoothed the scattered papers, erasing all evidence of their presence. Then they both composed their faces. Michael's shoulders relaxed into his caring son posture. Jennifer's expression melted back into gentle concern. They walked out of frame looking exactly like the devoted children who'd return later with dinner and worried questions about my appetite. The screen went dark, leaving me alone in my living room with the truth. My son, the baby boy I'd rocked through nightmares, taught to ride a bicycle, celebrated through Little League games and graduation ceremonies, had been planning to steal everything Harold and I had worked for over 43 years of marriage. And his wife had possibly murdered my husband with carefully timed medications while wearing the mask of a caring daughter. They thought I was just a confused old woman, helpless, forgettable, easy to manipulate and eventually discard. But Harold hadn't thought I was helpless. He'd hidden evidence, installed cameras, left me breadcrumbs to follow when he couldn't warn me directly. Harold had believed I was strong enough to fight back. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the house settle around me. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9 times. Michael and Jennifer would be gone for hours, enjoying dinner and wine while planning my destruction. They'd made one crucial mistake, though. They'd underestimated the quiet housewife who'd been paying attention to their lies. And they'd certainly underestimated how far a woman would go to protect the memory of the man she'd loved for 43 years. I opened Harold's desk drawer and pulled out the small notebook where he'd always kept important phone numbers. Rebecca's number was written in his careful handwriting, along with a note I'd never noticed before. If anything happens to me, call Rebecca immediately. Tell her to check the safety deposit box. Harold had been preparing me for this moment. Now it was time to see if his daughter had inherited more than just his eyes. I spent 3 sleepless nights planning my performance. The clock on Harold's nightstand ticked past midnight, then 1, then 2, while I rehearsed confused expressions in the bathroom mirror and practiced forgetting conversations I'd never had. The evidence from Harold's hidden camera was damning, but it wasn't enough. Any lawyer could argue that Michael and Jennifer were simply discussing family concerns, that their private frustrations didn't prove criminal intent. I needed them to reveal themselves completely, to say things so damning that no jury would believe their devoted children act. Wednesday morning arrived with Michael's familiar knock. I took a deep breath, smoothed my bathrobe, and opened the door with a blank expression. "Michael? What are you doing here, sweetheart?" His face cycled through surprise, concern, then something else. His eyes brightened just slightly like a man seeing unexpected good news. "Mom, it's Wednesday." "I always come on Wednesdays, remember?" I let my face crumple with embarrassment, my hands fluttering to my cheeks. "Oh, of course, I'm sorry. Everything feels so scattered since your father..." The tears came easily because they were real. Not tears of confusion, but tears of grief for the son I'd thought I had. The boy who'd brought me dandelions from the yard and insisted they were prettier than roses. "It's okay, Mom." Michael's voice was gentle, but I caught the quick glance he shot toward his phone. Already texting Jennifer, no doubt. Over the following days, I crafted my decline carefully. I forgot where I'd put the coffee filters, asking Michael to help me find them 3 times in one morning. I lost track of conversations about the bank accounts, forcing Jennifer to repeat herself with exaggerated patience. "Mom, we talked about this yesterday," she'd say, her voice honey-sweet while her fingers drummed against the kitchen counter. "You signed the papers to consolidate everything into the main account." Did I? I don't remember signing anything. Jennifer's smile tightened at the corners. "Of course you did. You were sitting right there at the kitchen table." I blinked at her with wide, uncertain eyes while secretly photographing every document she brought me. Thank God for Harold's old digital camera with its silent mode. Each signature she collected, I documented. Each forged form, I recorded. My retired lawyer friend, Dorothy Banks, became my secret ally. I'd call her from the grocery store payphone, explaining that I needed legal advice for a fictional story I was writing. Hypothetically, Dorothy, if someone were forging an elderly woman's signature on financial documents, what would constitute proof? Documentation, Eleanor. Photos, copies, witness testimony. Why are you asking? Just curious about plot research. Dorothy's pause stretched long enough to make me nervous. "Eleanor, if this isn't fiction, you need to be very careful. Financial elder abuse is serious business. The breakthrough came Friday afternoon when I staged my most dangerous performance yet." Jennifer was upstairs organizing Harold's closet while I pretended to nap on the living room couch. I left the gas burner on the stove turned to low, just enough to fill the kitchen with the smell of gas without creating real danger. Jennifer's heels clicked down the stairs rapidly when she caught the scent. "Eleanor! Eleanor, wake up!" I opened my eyes slowly, blinking in confusion. "What's wrong, dear?" "You left the stove on." The whole kitchen could have filled with gas. I struggled to sit up, letting my hands shake visibly. "I was just making tea." I thought I turned it off. Jennifer turned off the burner with sharp, efficient movements. When she turned back to me, her eyes were gleaming with satisfaction. "Maybe it's time to consider assisted living," she said gently, kneeling beside the couch like a concerned daughter. "Just temporarily while you adjust. Michael and I could handle all the financial transitions for you." Financial transitions. Such a polite way to say theft. "I don't want to leave Harold's house," I whispered. "I know, but you'd be so much safer." There are wonderful facilities that specialize in memory care. Memory care. I watched her face as she said it, noting how her lips curved in what she probably thought was a reassuring smile. To me, it looked predatory. Michael arrived 20 minutes later, his face grave with concern that felt rehearsed. "Mom, Jennifer told me about the stove. We're worried about you living alone." I watched my son nod eagerly as Jennifer outlined their assisted living plan and felt my heart crack a little more. This was the baby I'd sung to sleep, the toddler who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms. Now he was calculating how quickly he could warehouse me while stealing everything Harold and I had built together. But I continued my performance, even signing the preliminary paperwork Jennifer produced from her ever-present purse. Each signature was meaningless. Dorothy had helped me move the real assets to accounts Michael and Jennifer didn't know existed, but each document they collected made them more confident, more careless. The real revelation came when Jennifer thought I was napping upstairs. I crept to the top of the staircase and listened to her phone conversation in the kitchen below. "The house appraisal came back at $650,000, she said, her voice crisp with excitement. "With the investment accounts and life insurance, we're looking at over $1 million total." Over $1 million. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle a gasp. Harold had been more successful than I'd realized, and I'd been too trusting to pay attention to the details of our finances. "The lawyer says the will is ironclad," Jennifer continued, "and with her obvious cognitive decline, no one will question our decisions." Obvious cognitive decline. I thought of my carefully crafted performances, my practiced confusion, my deliberate memory lapses. They believed every moment of it. But Jennifer's next words froze my blood. "Dr. Morrison says the assisted living facility has an excellent record, very discreet. Eleanor could live there very comfortably for years, or she might find the transition too stressful. You know how fragile elderly people can be when removed from familiar surroundings. The implication was crystal clear. Once they isolated me in some facility, anything could happen. An unfortunate reaction to medication, a fall in the bathroom, or simply years of chemical compliance while they enjoyed my inheritance. I crept back to my bedroom, my performance momentarily forgotten. The assisted living papers were probably already prepared, waiting for the right moment when their confused mother would sign away her freedom along with her money. That evening, after Michael and Jennifer left with promises to return tomorrow with more information about facilities, I made the most important phone call of my life. But I didn't call Rebecca directly. Michael and Jennifer had been screening my calls for weeks, and I couldn't risk them intercepting this conversation. Instead, I called Mrs. Morgan, Rebecca's neighbor in Los Angeles. I'd met her during my last visit to California, a sharp-eyed woman who tended an elaborate garden and noticed everything that happened on her street. "Mrs. Morgan, this is Eleanor Whitman, Rebecca's mother. I need you to give Rebecca a message, but it's very important that you don't mention I called directly. Can you do that for me?" "Of course, Mrs. Whitman. Is everything all right?" I chose my words carefully, knowing that Rebecca would understand their significance, even if Mrs. Morgan didn't. "Tell Rebecca that I found her father's old photo albums in the attic, the ones from when she was little. Tell her there are pictures in there that she needs to see, especially the ones from her 10th birthday party. Tell her it's urgent that she comes home to look at them." Rebecca's 10th birthday. The day Harold had given her a diary with a little gold lock, teaching her that some secrets were worth protecting. Rebecca would remember. She'd understand that her mother was trying to tell her something without saying it directly. Also, "Mrs. Morgan, please tell her that the key to the photo albums is in the same place her father always kept important keys. She'll know what that means." I hung up the phone and sat in Harold's chair, surrounded by 43 years of memories. Tomorrow, Michael and Jennifer would return with their caring smiles and their legal documents, believing they were manipulating a confused old woman who posed no threat to their carefully laid plans. They had no idea that Harold's daughter was about to get a very interesting message about photo albums and birthday parties and keys that opened more than just locks. The white rental car pulled into my driveway at exactly 10:15 Saturday morning. I was washing dishes at the kitchen sink when I spotted it through the window, my hands freezing in the soapy water as a familiar figure stepped out onto the concrete. Rebecca. My daughter moved with the same determined stride she'd inherited from Harold, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her jeans and sweater wrinkled from the red-eye flight. She grabbed a small suitcase from the trunk just as Michael and Jennifer emerged from the house, their arms full of shopping bags and their faces bright with Saturday morning satisfaction. The collision was perfect timing that I couldn't have orchestrated if I'd tried. "Rebecca!" Michael's voice carried across the yard, pitched higher than usual. "What are you doing here? You didn't say you were coming." I watched my daughter's face through the window as she registered Michael's tone. Her expression shifted from tired travel fatigue to sharp alertness in the space of a heartbeat. Rebecca had always been able to read people like Harold read financial statements quickly and with uncomfortable accuracy. "I wanted to surprise Mom," Rebecca said, her voice carefully neutral. "Check on how she's doing." But I heard the steel underneath her words. My daughter hadn't just come for a surprise visit. Mrs. Morgan had delivered my message about photo albums and 10th birthday parties, and Rebecca had understood exactly what her mother was really saying. I dried my hands quickly and hurried to the front door, arranging my face into the confused expression I'd been practicing for days. When I opened the door, I let genuine joy break through the act for just a moment. "Rebecca, darling." Then I caught myself blinking with uncertainty. "But was I expecting you? I'm so scattered lately." My daughter's sharp look told me she'd caught the performance immediately. Rebecca had always been able to read me like a book, even as a child. She could tell when I was hiding Christmas presents or worrying about Harold's business troubles. Now she was seeing through my confused act to the mother underneath, who was very much in control. We moved into the living room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Jennifer settled onto the couch with her practiced grace, smoothing her skirt and arranging her expression into concerned compassion. "Rebecca, I'm so glad you're here," Jennifer began, her voice warm with false sincerity. "Your mother's been struggling since Harold passed. She's been so confused. Yesterday, she couldn't remember where she kept the tea. We've been discussing some care options." "What kind of care options?" Rebecca's voice could have etched glass. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. I watched my daughter's journalist instincts kick in, the same instincts that had made her so successful covering political corruption in Los Angeles. Michael jumped in quickly, his words tumbling over each other. "Just some assistance. Mom's having trouble managing the house, the finances. We found a lovely facility." Facility? Rebecca's volume rose, and I saw Jennifer flinch slightly. "Mom's been living independently for 68 years. She managed a household, raised 2 children, helped Dad run his business for decades. Now suddenly, she can't manage tea?" I felt a surge of pride watching my daughter dissect their story with surgical precision. Rebecca had learned skepticism from Harold Trust, but verify everything. She'd inherited his analytical mind along with my intuition, and right now, both were working overtime. Michael's face flushed red. "Rebecca, you don't understand. You live 3,000 miles away. You don't see the day-to-day struggles. Then maybe I should start seeing them." Rebecca's tone was arctic. "Maybe I should stick around for a while." "Take some time off work." Jennifer's fingers tightened on her purse strap. "That's really not necessary. Michael and I have everything under control. I'm sure you do." Rebecca's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. After 20 minutes of increasingly uncomfortable conversation, Michael and Jennifer finally escaped with promises to discuss Rebecca's concerns when they returned from their errands. I watched through the window as they drove away, Jennifer's hands gesturing frantically as she spoke to Michael. The moment their car disappeared around the corner, I dropped my confused act completely. "Rebecca, we need to talk, and we probably have 2 hours before they're back." My daughter's eyes widened as my confusion evaporated entirely, replaced by the clear-eyed determination she remembered from her childhood. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" I showed her everything. Harold's hidden evidence, the USB drive footage, the forged documents, the bank statements showing hundreds of thousands of dollars in mysterious transfers. Rebecca's face cycled through shock, horror, and then cold fury that reminded me exactly whose daughter she was. "That bitch has been forging your signature for months," Rebecca breathed, examining the documents with her reporter's eye for detail. "And Michael. God, Mom, they were planning to kill you." Kill. The word hung in the air between us like smoke. "Not directly," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But isolation, medication management, convenient accidents. I need your help, but we have to be very careful. They can't know I'm on to them." Rebecca paced the living room like a caged tiger, her energy crackling with barely contained rage. "We're calling the police." "Right now. With what proof? A hidden camera that might not be admissible in court? Forged signatures that I apparently signed willingly while confused with grief. They've been so careful to appear devoted, and I've been playing confused for days now." Rebecca stopped pacing and stared at me. "Then what's your plan?" I smiled for the first time in weeks. A smile that I could see reminded Rebecca exactly where she'd inherited her own steel spine. The same smile I'd worn when she was 16 and trying to sneak out to a party, thinking she could outwit her mother. We're going to let them think they've won. And then we're going to destroy them so completely they'll wish they'd never heard the name Whitman. Rebecca stared at me with new respect, seeing perhaps for the first time that her mother was more than just the woman who'd made her school lunches and worried about her staying out too late. "What do you need me to do?" I opened Harold's desk drawer and pulled out a small digital recorder, another of his paranoid preparations that had seemed excessive 2 weeks ago and now felt like salvation. "First, you're going to pretend to be convinced that I need assisted living. Support Michael and Jennifer's plan completely. But while you're doing that, you're going to record every conversation where they discuss their real intentions. That's dangerous, Mom. If they suspect, they won't." My voice carried 43 years of accumulated wisdom about underestimating quiet women. "They think they're so much smarter than us. Jennifer actually said no one would believe a confused old woman over the devoted children." I felt my eyes flash with the anger I'd been hiding for days. They're about to learn that underestimating women like us is the stupidest mistake they could make. Rebecca nodded slowly, and I saw Harold's calculated intelligence mixing with my own protective fury in her expression. "When do we start?" I glanced at the clock on the mantel. 11:30. Michael and Jennifer would return within the hour, expecting to find their confused mother and her concerned daughter discussing care options. Instead, they were going to find two women who were about to show them exactly what happened when you threatened the wrong family. Rebecca's transformation was masterful. Monday morning, she sat across from Jennifer at my kitchen table, cradling a coffee mug and wearing an expression of reluctant concern that would have fooled me if I hadn't known better. I remained upstairs in my bedroom, supposedly napping while Harold's digital recorder captured every word through the heating vent. "Maybe Michael's right about the assisted living," Rebecca said, her voice heavy with manufactured resignation. "I hate to admit it, but Mom does seem different." I heard Jennifer's sharp intake of breath, followed by what I could only describe as a purr of satisfaction. "It's so hard to watch, isn't it? But Michael and I have researched the best facilities. Brightview Living has an excellent reputation. Very comfortable, very safe." "Safe," Rebecca repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "Oh yes. They have 24-hour medical care, controlled medication distribution, restricted visitor access. Eleanor would be completely protected from any confusion or outside influences that might upset her. Controlled medication, restricted visitors." The words sent ice through my veins, even though I'd been expecting them. Jennifer was describing a prison, not a care facility, and she was doing it with the enthusiasm of someone planning a vacation. Over the next 3 days, Rebecca played her part flawlessly while I remained in my confused character upstairs, ears straining to catch every conversation. The recorder captured Jennifer's increasingly revealing comments as she grew more comfortable with my daughter's apparent support. "The house sale will simplify everything," Jennifer explained during one particularly damning conversation. "Eleanor won't need to worry about property taxes or maintenance. Michael can handle all the financial details." "That makes sense," Rebecca agreed. "And I suppose I won't need to visit too often once she's settled." "Actually, that's probably best," Jennifer said, her voice smooth as honey over broken glass. "Sometimes familiar faces can be agitating for patients in transition. Too many visitors can interfere with the adjustment process." I pressed my ear closer to the vent, documenting every lie in my mental notebook. They wanted Rebecca far away, unable to witness whatever they planned to do to me in that facility. While Rebecca gathered evidence upstairs, I continued my own secret documentation downstairs. Each morning, Jennifer arrived with more papers for me to sign, her explanations growing shorter and more dismissive as my supposed confusion deepened. "Just some insurance updates, Eleanor," she'd say, sliding documents across the kitchen table while I blinked at them with wide, uncertain eyes. But I was photographing every page with Harold's camera pen before signing, building my own evidence file of their systematic theft, power of attorney forms I'd never agreed to, trust modifications that stripped Rebecca of her inheritance, even preliminary deed transfers that would give Michael ownership of our house the moment I entered Brightview Living. Most importantly, I was transferring money from accounts Jennifer didn't know existed. Harold's paranoia had served us well. He'd maintained several accounts under different variations of our names, tucked away in small banks across 3 counties. While Jennifer counted the money in our primary accounts, hundreds of thousands of dollars sat safely beyond her reach. Wednesday night arrived with the weight of destiny. Rebecca had supposedly returned to Los Angeles that morning, tearfully hugging me goodbye while promising to support whatever Michael and Jennifer thought was best. In reality, she was hiding at Mrs. Patterson's house next door, her phone recording on speaker mode, ready to capture whatever happened during our family dinner. Michael arrived at 6 o'clock sharp, carrying takeout bags from my favorite Chinese restaurant and wearing his most concerned son expression. Jennifer followed with a manila folder thick with documents and a smile that made my skin crawl. "How are we feeling tonight, Mom?" Jennifer asked, arranging the food containers on my kitchen table with careful precision. "Tired," I said honestly. "So very tired." Michael patted my shoulder with practiced gentleness. "That's why we're here, Mom. To take care of everything so you don't have to worry anymore." We ate in relative silence, the tension thick as fog between us. I pushed lo mein around my plate while Jennifer made small talk about the weather and Michael checked his phone repeatedly. Finally, as I pretended to struggle with my chopsticks, Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, we've been thinking. Maybe it's time to make this transition to Brightview Living. The paperwork's all ready." I let my face crumple with fear, my hands trembling as I set down my chopsticks. "But this is my home. Harold and I lived here for 30 years. "I know, Mom, but you'll be so much safer," Michael said, his voice gentle but firm. "And Jennifer and I can handle all the legal details, the house sale, the account transfers, everything." Account transfers, house sale. They weren't even pretending anymore that this was about my care. "What about Rebecca?" I asked, my voice small and confused. "Shouldn't she be involved in these decisions?" Jennifer's voice hardened just slightly, a crack in her caring facade. "Rebecca lives across the country, Eleanor. She can't possibly understand your day-to-day needs like we do. Michael is your local family. He has power of attorney now." I blinked at her with wide, uncertain eyes. "Power of attorney? When did that happen?" "You signed the papers last week, remember?" "Right after your little incident with the stove? I hadn't signed any power of attorney papers." Jennifer was lying boldly, counting on my supposed confusion to cover her tracks. But Harold's recorder in my sweater pocket was capturing every lie. "Now," Jennifer continued, pulling out her thick folder, "I need you to sign a few more documents. Just standard transition paperwork for Brightview Living." She spread the papers across the table like a dealer laying out cards, and I looked at them with wide, frightened eyes. Mixed in with legitimate-looking care facility forms were property transfer documents and revised financial account papers. Jennifer was moving to strip me of every asset I owned while I sat there, supposedly too confused to understand. "I don't understand all these legal words," I whispered, my voice shaking with manufactured fear. "That's why you have us," Michael said, guiding my hand toward the pen Jennifer had placed beside the papers. "We'll take care of everything." I signed each document slowly, carefully, letting my hand shake just enough to look uncertain. But before each signature, I palmed the papers briefly, photographing the fine print with Harold's camera pen, every fraudulent clause, every illegal transfer, every piece of evidence that would destroy them in court. Each signature was meaningless because I'd already moved the real assets to accounts they didn't know existed. Let them think they were stealing millions while they actually grabbed empty accounts and worthless properties I'd already transferred to trusts in Rebecca's name. Jennifer collected the papers with barely concealed triumph, her fingers caressing the forged documents like precious treasures. There. That wasn't so hard, was it? Now you don't have to worry about anything anymore. Don't worry. As if watching your family steal everything you'd worked for was supposed to be comforting. They left at 9 o'clock, their voices cheerful with victory as they walked to their car. I watched through the kitchen window as Jennifer waved the signed papers at Michael, both of them smiling like they'd just won the lottery. The moment their taillights disappeared around the corner, I called Rebecca. "It's time," I said, my voice steady with grim satisfaction. "They just showed their hand completely, and I've got everything we need. What's the next step?" I looked at Harold's camera pen on the kitchen table, thinking of all the evidence we'd gathered, all the lies we'd documented, all the proof we'd need to destroy them completely. Tomorrow morning, we're visiting Detective Sarah Morrison at the county sheriff's office. And then we're going to pay a very educational visit to Brightview Living. Brightview Living? Why? I smiled in the darkness of my kitchen, feeling Harold's presence beside me like a warm hand on my shoulder, because I want to see exactly what kind of hell they were planning to send me to. And I want to make sure no other family ever has to go through what we've been through. Rebecca's voice was steady when she answered, carrying the same steel determination I'd heard in Harold's voice when he'd fought for our business 40 years ago. "What time should I meet you at the sheriff's office?" 8 o'clock sharp. And Rebecca? "Yes, Mom?" I touched the digital recorder that had captured every incriminating word of tonight's dinner, then looked around the kitchen where Harold and I had shared 43 years of honest conversations and real love. "Bring copies of everything we've recorded. It's time to show Detective Morrison exactly what devoted children look like when they think nobody's watching." Detective Sarah Morrison's office smelled like stale coffee and old case files. She sat across from Rebecca and me at 8 o'clock sharp Thursday morning, her sharp gray eyes studying the mountain of evidence we'd spread across her desk. The recordings, the photographs, the forged documents, Harold's security footage, everything that proved my son and daughter-in-law were thieves and possibly murderers. Morrison was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-40s, with the kind of focused intensity that reminded me of Rebecca during her investigative journalism days. She took careful notes in precise handwriting while our recorded conversations played through her computer speakers. Jennifer's voice filled the room. Eleanor could live there very comfortably for years, or she might find the transition too stressful. You know how fragile elderly people can be when removed from familiar surroundings. Morrison's pen stopped moving. "This is substantial evidence," she admitted, leaning back in her chair. "But we need to be strategic about arrests. If we move too early, they might claim the signatures were legitimate and that Mrs. Whitman was simply confused." "What do you suggest?" Rebecca asked, her fingers drumming against the arm of her chair. "Let them complete their plan. Let them think they've succeeded. Then we'll have them on multiple felonies, elder abuse, fraud, forgery, possibly even attempted murder if we can prove medication tampering." Attempted murder. The words hung in the air like smoke. Morrison was talking about Harold's death, about Jennifer's careful medication timing, about the possibility that my husband had been killed while I held his hand in that hospital bed. I nodded grimly, my voice steadier than I felt. "How long do we have to maintain this charade?" "Probably just a few more days. They'll want to move quickly once they think you've signed everything." After leaving the sheriff's office, Rebecca and I drove to Brightview Living for my orientation visit. The facility sat on a landscaped hill outside town, its modern brick facade gleaming in the afternoon sun. Manicured gardens surrounded the building, complete with cheerful flower beds and a small fountain that sparkled in the light. It looked like paradise. But I noticed the subtle details that told a different story. electronic locks on every door, windows that opened only a few inches with mesh screens that looked more like barriers than safety features, security cameras positioned at every corner, their dark lenses tracking movement like mechanical eyes. Mr. Charles Hoffman greeted us in the lobby with practiced warmth, his smile bright and his handshake firm. He was a tall man in his 50s, with silver hair and expensive clothes that suggested Brightview living was a profitable business. "Mrs. Whitman, Michael and Jennifer have told us so much about you. We're thrilled to welcome you to our family." Family. The word made my skin crawl. As we toured the facility, I asked pointed questions while maintaining my confused elderly woman act. The common areas were beautiful, soft furniture, warm lighting, classical music playing quietly in the background, but the residents sitting in those lovely chairs looked wrong. Half of them stared blankly at nothing, their eyes foggy with medication. The others watched the staff with fearful expressions, like animals waiting for the next blow. "The doors all have special locks?" I asked, pointing to the electronic keypads beside each exit. "For safety, of course," Hoffman explained smoothly. "We can't have residents wandering off and getting lost. Some of our patients have advanced dementia and might not remember where they are." "And visiting hours?" "Strictly controlled. We find that too much outside stimulation can be overwhelming for our residents. Family visits are limited to 1 hour twice a week, and only with approved visitors. 1 hour twice a week. I thought about Rebecca living 3,000 miles away, about how Jennifer had planned to isolate me completely from anyone who might ask questions. As we walked through the residential wing, one elderly man tried to approach us. He was thin and frail, his clothes hanging loose on his shrinking frame, but his eyes were alert and desperate. "Please," he whispered, reaching toward me with a shaking hand. "I need to call my daughter." "They won't let me." A nurse appeared instantly, her grip firm on the old man's arm. "Mr. Patterson gets agitated around new people," she explained to Hoffman, her voice professionally calm. "Come along, Mr. Patterson." "Time for your afternoon medication." I watched them lead him away, noting how his shoulders slumped with defeat. "Help me," I heard him whisper as they disappeared around a corner. "They won't let me call my daughter." In Hoffman's office, he presented me with admission papers thick enough to choke a horse. "Just a formality," he said smoothly, spreading the documents across his polished desk. "Your son has already handled the financial arrangements." Financial arrangements. I wondered how much Michael was paying Brightview Living to warehouse me permanently. I pretended to read carefully, blinking with confusion at the legal language while secretly photographing each page with Harold's camera pen. Most of the clauses were standard assisted living boilerplate, but 2 made my blood run cold. Patient agrees to limited communication with outside family members to reduce transition stress. And worse, in the event of patient agitation or resistance to treatment, facility is authorized to implement enhanced medication protocols. Enhanced medication protocols. I understood now what Brightview Living really was not just overpriced assisted living, but a warehouse for inconvenient elderly relatives. A place where people like Mr. Patterson disappeared into pharmaceutical fog while their families looted their assets and waited for convenient deaths. "How many patients have transferred here from similar family situations?" I asked innocently, letting confusion color my voice. Hoffman's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "We specialize in difficult transitions. Many families find our approach final. Final." The word choice sent chills down my spine. Not helpful or effective. Final. After leaving Brightview Living, Rebecca and I sat in her rental car in the parking lot, both of us shaken by what we'd witnessed. "Mom, that place is a death camp for old people. And Michael and Jennifer know exactly what they're sending me to." My voice was steady, but my hands trembled as I buckled my seatbelt. The magnitude of their betrayal kept growing deeper, darker, more unforgivable. "Rebecca, I need you to do something for me." Call your Aunt Dorothy, Harold's sister in Phoenix. Tell her everything. If something happens to me before we can expose this, nothing's going to happen to you." Rebecca's voice was fierce. "We're ending this tomorrow." That evening, Michael called with excitement crackling through the phone line. "Mom, great news. Brightview Living has an opening this weekend. We can move you in Saturday morning." Saturday, 2 days away. "Isn't that awfully fast?" I asked, letting uncertainty creep into my voice. "Sometimes these opportunities don't last long. And honestly, Mom, after your confusion yesterday about signing those papers, Jennifer and I think sooner is better. We don't want you to worry about anything anymore." "Don't worry." They wanted me sedated and silent while they stole everything Harold and I had built together. After hanging up, I immediately called Detective Morrison. "They're accelerating the timeline." "Saturday morning. Perfect, we'll be ready." I hung up and walked through the house Harold and I had shared for 30 years, touching familiar objects and breathing in the scent of home. The grandfather clock in the hallway, the kitchen table where we'd eaten thousands of meals, the living room where we'd watched Rebecca take her first steps. If everything went according to plan, I'd be sleeping here Saturday night. If it didn't, I refused to consider that possibility, but Harold's paranoid nature had rubbed off on me over 4 decades of marriage. I opened his laptop and began typing a letter to Rebecca Insurance against the possibility that Michael and Jennifer might realize they'd been outplayed. "My dearest Rebecca," I wrote, "if you're reading this, then something has gone wrong with our plan. But I want you to know that everything we've done has been worth it, because it means you'll be safe from them. All the evidence is in Harold's safety deposit box, along with account numbers for the money I've hidden. Detective Morrison has copies of everything. Make them pay for what they did to your father. Make them pay for what they tried to do to me. And remember that I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Mom." I printed the letter and sealed it in an envelope with Rebecca's name, then placed it in Harold's desk drawer where she'd be sure to find it. Saturday morning was 36 hours away, and I could feel the weight of destiny pressing against my chest like a stone. Harold's camera pen sat on the desk beside me, its tiny lens having captured hours of incriminating evidence. I picked it up and held it to the light, thinking about all the secrets it had recorded, all the lies it had exposed. Tomorrow night, this would all be over, one way or another. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold, clouds hanging low over the neighborhood like a shroud. I stood at my bedroom window watching the empty street, my small suitcase packed and waiting by the door. The bag contained the items Michael and Jennifer expected me to bring. Toiletries, a few changes of clothes, Harold's reading glasses that I couldn't bear to leave behind. But hidden in the lining were copies of all our evidence, along with Harold's final letter that I'd discovered that morning taped under our bedroom dresser. His familiar handwriting had made my hands shake as I read it. "Ellie, if you're reading this, you survived their first attempt. I'm proud of you. I always said you were stronger than you knew. Make them pay for underestimating us. H. Their first attempt. Harold had known they might try again if I discovered their plan. He'd believed in my strength even when I didn't believe in it myself. Michael and Jennifer arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, both dressed in dark, somber clothing as if they were attending a funeral. Perhaps they were, I thought grimly as I watched them walk up the front path. The funeral of their lies, their schemes, their underestimation of the woman they'd tried to destroy. "Ready, Mom?" Michael's voice was gentle, but his eyes sparkled with anticipation. He was already counting the money they'd steal, already planning what to do with the house Harold and I had filled with 43 years of love. I played my part perfectly, appearing anxious and confused as they loaded my suitcase into Michael's car. My hands fluttered nervously as I climbed into the back seat. "Will I be able to come home for visits?" "Of course," Jennifer lied smoothly, adjusting the rearview mirror to watch my face. "Once you're settled." "Once you're dead," she meant. Once the inconvenient mother was permanently silenced. The drive to Brightview Living felt like a funeral procession. I sat in the back seat watching familiar neighborhoods pass by the grocery store where Harold had bought flowers every Friday, the park where we'd taken Michael and Rebecca for picnics, the church where we'd been married and where they'd held Harold's funeral just 2 weeks ago. I wondered if I'd ever see these places again. But my fear was overshadowed by anticipation, thrumming through my veins like electricity. Detective Morrison and her team were already in position, waiting for Michael and Jennifer to complete their crime. At Brightview Living, Hoffman greeted us in the lobby with his practiced warmth, his smile so bright it could have powered the building. "Mrs. Whitman!" "Welcome home!" Home. The word made my skin crawl like insects. They led me to a sterile room on the second floor, my apartment, though it looked more like a hospital room designed by someone who'd never experienced joy. A narrow bed with white sheets, a simple dresser, a single chair positioned to face the television, mounted high on the wall. The window was sealed shut with thick glass, and I noticed a discreet camera blinking in the corner like a mechanical vulture. This was where they planned to warehouse me until I died. This was where Mr. Patterson had begged for help that would never come. "Now," Hoffman said, pulling out his thick folder of documents. "We just need Mrs. Whitman to sign the final admission papers, and we'll be all set." This was it, the moment everything hinged on. I looked at the papers with wide, confused eyes, letting my hands tremble as I touched the pages. There are so many pages. What am I signing? "Just standard admission forms," Jennifer said, her voice sharp with impatience, "and a few updates to your financial arrangements to make payments easier." Standard admission forms. I knew these documents were anything but standard. Mixed in with legitimate admission papers were documents transferring my remaining assets to Michael, authorizing Brightview Living to make all medical decisions without consulting family, and even a revised will leaving everything to Michael in the event of sudden death. They weren't just planning to warehouse me, they were preparing for me to die here, conveniently and profitably. I signed each page carefully, using the special pen Detective Morrison had provided. Each signature contained invisible ink that would prove I was signing under duress and without proper legal counsel. Each forged clause would become evidence of their conspiracy. "I don't understand why there are so many papers," I whispered, my voice shaking with manufactured confusion. "Don't worry about it, Mom," Michael said, his hand guiding mine toward each signature line. "We'll take care of everything. Take care of everything, including making sure I never left this place alive." "Excellent," Hoffman said, collecting the papers with satisfaction. "Now, Mrs. Whitman needs to rest after such a big transition. Perhaps family visits should wait a few days." "Of course," Michael said quickly. "We don't want to overwhelm her." Overwhelm me with witnesses, he meant. Overwhelm me with people who might notice if I suddenly became confused or sick or dead. I watched my son and daughter-in-law prepare to leave me in this place, possibly forever. The magnitude of their betrayal hit me anew, sharp as a blade between my ribs. This was my baby boy, the child I'd rocked through nightmares and fevers, taught to ride a bicycle, celebrated through Little League victories and high school graduation and his wedding day. "Michael," I said softly. He turned, and for a moment I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who'd brought me dandelions and insisted they were prettier than roses, who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms and fell asleep with his head on my shoulder. "I love you. I want you to remember that." Something flickered in his eyes. Guilt? Regret? A shadow of the son I'd thought I'd raised? But Jennifer's hand on his arm pulled him back to their plan like a leash, jerking a dog to heel. "We love you too, Mom. Everything we're doing is for your own good. For your own good." The lie tasted bitter in the air between us. They left, and I heard the electronic lock engage on my door with a soft beep that sounded like a death knell. I was trapped in this sterile room with its sealed window and watching camera, supposedly confused and helpless while my family celebrated their successful theft, but only for 20 more minutes. At exactly 10:30, I heard commotion in the hallway outside my door, shouting voices, running footsteps, doors slamming like gunshots. Through my sealed window, I saw police cars surrounding the building, their red and blue lights painting the gray morning in colors of justice. Detective Morrison's voice echoed through the facility's intercom system, crisp and professional. "This is the County Sheriff's Department. We have warrants for the arrest of Michael David Whitman, Jennifer Lynn Whitman, and Charles Robert Hoffman. All staff and residents remain in your current locations until officers can ensure your safety." I sat on the narrow bed and smiled, really smiled for the first time since Harold's death. The relief flooded through me like warm water, washing away weeks of fear and performance and heartbreak. The electronic lock on my door disengaged with a soft click, and Detective Morrison entered with 2 uniformed officers. Her face was grim, but satisfied, like a hunter who'd successfully tracked dangerous prey. "Mrs. Whitman, are you all right?" "I'm perfect, Detective." My voice was steady now, clear and strong. "Did you get them?" "All 3. Michael and Jennifer were arrested in the parking lot trying to leave. Hoffman tried to run but didn't get far. Apparently, he had a suitcase full of cash in his office. We also have warrants for several staff members and are evacuating residents who were being held against their families' wishes." I stood up, straightening my shoulders and feeling years of fear and confusion fall away like old clothes. "What happens now?" "Now you go home, Mrs. Whitman, and Michael and Jennifer go to prison for a very long time." Prison. The word should have brought me satisfaction, but instead I felt hollow, grieving for the children I'd thought they were, while celebrating the justice they'd finally receive. Detective Morrison helped me gather my belongings, and as we walked through Brightview Living's lobby, I saw Mr. Patterson being wheeled out by paramedics. His daughter stood beside the gurney, tears streaming down her face as she held his hand. "Dad, I'm here," she whispered. "I'm sorry it took so long to find you." Outside, I watched Michael and Jennifer being loaded into separate police cars, their hands cuffed behind their backs. Michael's face was pale with shock, but Jennifer's expression was pure rage, her eyes burning with fury at being caught. As the police cars pulled away, I felt Harold's presence beside me like a warm hand on my shoulder. We'd done it. We'd made them pay for underestimating us. But as I climbed into Rebecca's rental car for the drive home, I realized this was only the beginning. The arrests, the trials, the rebuilding of my life, all of that lay ahead like an uncharted country I'd have to navigate alone. The courtroom was packed that Tuesday morning in February. 6 months had passed since the arrests, and I sat in the front row wearing my best navy dress, the one Harold had always said brought out my eyes. Rebecca squeezed my hand as Judge Patricia Reeves entered, her black robes flowing behind her like wings of justice. The evidence had been overwhelming. Not just our recordings and Harold's hidden documents, but investigators had uncovered an entire network of corruption. Brightview Living had been operating an elder abuse scheme for years, with dozens of families involved. Michael and Jennifer weren't unique predators. They were part of a system designed to warehouse inconvenient elderly relatives while their assets disappeared. "Michael David Whitman," Judge Reeves intoned, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "you are sentenced to 12 years in state prison for elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy." 12 years. I watched my son's shoulders sag as the bailiff approached with handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the truth of what he'd done. Jennifer Lynn Whitman, 15 years for the same charges, plus attempted murder for medication tampering. Attempted murder. The words hung in the courtroom air like smoke. Jennifer's face remained stone cold as they led her away, her chin raised in defiance even in defeat. I felt no satisfaction watching my son disappear through the courtroom doors in shackles. The victory was hollow because it had cost me everything I'd believed about my family. But Harold's presence seemed to settle beside me like a warm coat, proud that I'd found the strength to fight back. "It's over, Mom," Rebecca whispered, her fingers intertwined with mine. Over, but also beginning. The aftermath brought revelations that staggered me. Harold's hidden accounts contained over $1.2 million money he'd quietly saved and invested throughout our marriage, preparing for my security in ways I'd never imagined. Michael and Jennifer had stolen hundreds of thousands, but they'd only accessed a fraction of our actual wealth. More importantly, I discovered strengths I'd never known I possessed. At 68, I learned to manage investments, hired my own lawyer, and even testified before the state legislature about elder abuse prevention. Harold's paranoid preparations had saved my life, but my own intelligence and determination had saved my future. The house feels different now. Not lonely, but peaceful. I installed my own security system visible this time, cameras that announce their presence rather than hide behind spice racks. But I kept Harold's hidden camera too. Trust but verify, as he always said. Rebecca returned to Los Angeles but visits monthly now, sometimes bringing her colleague David, a kind man who makes her laugh in ways I haven't heard since she was young. We talk twice a week, really talk, about everything Harold's secretiveness had prevented us from discussing. Money, fears, dreams, the future that stretches ahead of both of us. Harold's greatest gift wasn't the money he'd hidden, but the strength he'd always seen in me, even when I couldn't see it myself. I found dozens more of his letters hidden throughout the house, tucked behind books, taped under drawers, slipped between photo albums. Each one expressed his love and confidence in my abilities. My favorite was discovered inside his old toolbox, written in his careful handwriting. "Ellie, you've always been the strongest person I know. You just needed to believe it yourself." Michael writes from prison occasionally, letters full of self-pity and blame that I read once and then file away unanswered. He blames stress, blames Jennifer's influence, blames everyone except the man who chose to steal from his mother. Jennifer doesn't write at all. I mourn the son I thought I had while accepting the man he actually was. The money they stole was recovered and returned through legal proceedings that took months to untangle. I use it to fund the Harold Whitman Foundation, helping elderly victims of financial abuse navigate betrayals similar to mine. We've already assisted dozens of families, providing legal aid and emotional support to people who thought they were alone in their suffering. On quiet evenings, I sometimes sit in my new car, a red convertible that Harold would have called frivolous, but that makes me smile every time I see it in the driveway. I open the glove box and think about that manila envelope that changed everything. One hidden key had unlocked not just a safety deposit box, but my own power. I never underestimate myself again. Last week, I wrote in my journal for the first time since Harold's death. The words came slowly at first, then faster as I found my voice on the page. Harold always said I was stronger than I knew. He was right. I just wish he could have told me while he was alive instead of leaving me breadcrumbs to find my own way. But maybe that was the point. Some strength can only be discovered, never given. Today, I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. I volunteer at the senior center, teaching other widows about financial protection. I've joined a book club where we discuss mysteries and thrillers, and I always smile when someone mentions how unrealistic the plots seem. I'm finally the woman Harold always knew I could be, and tomorrow I'll become someone even stronger.